once again, everyone. Welcome to another program devoted to immortal sounds from the past. A look at some of the great voices and the great instrumentalists from the past who have done so much to contribute toward our musical heritage. Hosting for KIOS-FM, this is Jim Price, introducing again, with a great deal of pleasure, my co-host, cantor Manfred Kuttner of Temple Israel in Omaha, Nebraska. Manfred, we have, I would imagine here, looking at our music sheet, quite a wide diversification of program today. Would you care to comment on it?
Yes, and I would like to congratulate you and your station that they finally received the right needle, the 78 needle. We call it the 78 needle, meaning a needle that would play the old 78 records. And we noticed that they play exceptionally well with the needle.
It is true. And you know, one thing about it, according to the information from our chief engineer, Jim Lanier, that these are not easy to come by. These.
Yes, it took us about a half a year to get them. And I was surprised to hear that my old records from, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, some of them 50 years ago, play so well and sound so well. So our listeners will be satisfied with the concert that we have in store for them. Our first presentation will be a symphony that is not played too often anymore.
And unfortunately so, too, really.
Yes. Well, as a matter of fact, for about 30, 40 years, it was completely out of programs and catalogs.
Why is that?
Well, it goes with music often that things go out of style. Like, for instance, the operas by Meyerbeer are out of style at the moment. Maybe someday they come back. There even has been a recording made recently of the Meyerbeer work. And the same goes with this symphony, which is a kind of corny, melodious, classic, well-written symphony, but people didn't care for it too much in the last 30 or 40 years. But now it comes back, and I noticed that in the Schwann catalog, which is like a thermometer of our musical cultural heritage, we have two recordings in the new Schwann catalog, one conducted by Abravanel and one with conducted by Bernstein with the New York Philharmonic. So it seems to be coming back into the concert halls again.
And the symphony we're referring to, of course, is the Rustic Wedding Symphony by Karl Goldmark.
Karl Goldmark, who wrote that beautiful violin concerto, which is, of course, played very often by our great artists. Now, this symphony consists, oddly to say, of 6 movements, or rather 5, 5 movements, and has not the usual classic division of allegro, menuetto, larghetto. It is more or less a symphonic poem of a rustic wedding, a rural wedding. And we selected the last movement, the 5th movement, which is a dance, a kind of a boisterous composition. And it is played by the Orchestra of the Vienna State Opera, conducted by Henry Svoboda.
Are you familiar with Mr. Svoboda?
Not too much. I know him by name, but he's not too well known in this country, but he's a very fine all-around conductor. I like to tell a little story of my personal experience with this symphony, but let's listen to the music first. Karl Goldmark's Rustic Wedding Symphony, played by the Vienna State Opera, conducted by Henry Svoboda.
The finale to the Carl Goldmark Rustic Wedding Symphony, it sounds to me, and I'm not accusing him of plagiarism or anything, but it sounds like he took quite a cue from Beethoven on the long endings. Did you notice that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, Manfred, you mentioned prior to the introduction of our Goldmark Rustic Wedding that you had a little story you'd like to tell us. Would you give it to us now, please?
You know, in a long musical life, you can tell many anecdotes that happened during the performance, before and after, too. Now, I just remembered when the music started playing, and our listeners might have noticed in the last movement he goes into a little slow movement, a slow melody, which is a reminiscence of the garden scene, the previous movement of the same symphony, that I remembered when I played the symphony as a trumpet player in Frankfurt. And the conductor was Dr. Julius Prüver. At that time, quite an elderly man. He must have been about 70 years, while I was about 21 or 22. And during the scene of this garden movement, I had, as a trumpeter, I had about 80 bars rest. And during this 80 bars rest, I didn't need to count anymore because I knew the symphony well enough not to count the 80 bars. So my mind wandered from the music to the audience, and right in front, in the first row, I saw a girl with a rather daring décolleté, low-cut evening gown. And I was fascinated by this girl and by the gown and what it shows, while the symphony, of course, went on playing. Now, after the 80 bars, the composer wrote a kind of a motion into the orchestra that we reach up into a climax, which probably can be interpreted as the kiss in a garden of the loving pair. And I was completely oblivious of what was going on in the garden scene, and my eyes were still glued to this girl in the front seat. And my cue came, the conductor turned to the trumpets, and I, as the first trumpet player, I didn't watch him. The second trumpet player relied on me. With other words, we didn't come in with the climactic chord of the brass and the cymbals and the timpani. But as soon as I heard this loud crash, I was roughly awakened, and I tried to catch this note, which of course I couldn't. And the conductor for the rest of the movement looked at me and stared at me, and I felt like 2 cents going under the ground, hiding somewhere, which of course I couldn't. The next morning, at the rehearsal next morning, I took courage enough to go to him and to apologize for my lack of attentiveness. And he says, Kuttner, don't worry about it. No, I said to him, I saw a beautiful girl in the first row, and she took my attention away from the music. And he said, Kuttner, don't worry about it. I saw her too.
Always forgiven.
I noticed it too, yeah. He was a very fine, humane man.
Okay, now we come to something vocal, do we not, on our Immortal Sounds program?
Yes, we promised our listeners that we would play for them some of the maple cylinders. And to recall what it is all about, Edison, in 1900 presented Lionel Mapleson, who was a librarian at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. Edison presented him with a cylinder recording equipment. So from 1901 to 1903, Mapleson recorded fragments of actual Metropolitan Opera performances. The results of his endeavor are weak due to the remote placement of the acoustical equipment pictured, like a large horn that was set up behind the scenery to catch glimpses of the voices. Now, we are playing for you a re-recording of one of those cylinders, which was recorded in 1901. But in order to make it easier for our listeners to recognize what is being sung, we are playing first a later recording by Lauritz, a song by Lauritz Melchior. The scene is the forging cave of Mime in the opera Siegfried by Wagner, and Siegfried is hammering away on a sword with a name that he named Notung, needful. He's hammering away, and while he is hammering away at it, he sings this famous forging song. So, before we hear the 1901 recording, Let us listen to a 1935 recording of Lauritz Melchior singing the Forging Song by Wagner from his opera Siegfried. Yeah, we cut off here because the Forging Song is finished. Now what we just heard was Lauritz Melchior in his prime singing the Forging Song from Siegfried. Now we return about 40 years earlier to the Maple Cylinders, which was made in 1901. The Siegfried at that time was one of the most outstanding singers of musical history. Jean de Reszke, a Frenchman. Some people would put him higher than Caruso as far as his voice is concerned. Now, as I said before, the results of the cylinder recordings are weak. Some of the cylinders have surface noise of varying degrees due to wear from frequent playing of the originals in the past. We should not forget those cylinders were to be played only 10 or 12 times.
Then discarded, is that correct?
Then discarded. But then this cylinder that you're going to hear now probably was played 100, 200 times and then recorded, and therefore you hear so much surface noise. Sometimes cylinders were damaged. But in spite of these defects, the present recreations are so highly fascinating and serve as a faint echo of a fabulous era of vocal art. Now, Jean de Reszke will sing now, and I hope our listeners can detect a few notes from this Forging Song from the opera Siegfried by Wagner. It is taken at a live performance in the year 1901. There wasn't much to be heard, but whatever it was, when it was, it is a gem to behold from an era long time gone.
You know, I'm surprised at one thing, Manfred. Speaking of the age, 1901, when this was done, I'm surprised the orchestra came through so well.
Yes, especially the trombones.
Mhm.
You hear
Yes, it did. Because
Yes,
in those days, whenever an orchestra recorded, it sounded like a hurdy-gurdy, really,
Yes,
because
yes.
of the inferior equipment that was used.
yes. But we are thankful to Thomas Edison, we are thankful to Mr. Lionel Mabelson, and we are also thankful to Jim Brives to let us play something like this for you. You probably have never heard a recording of that kind. So good and so bad in one.
Next, I expect you to bring a Beethoven recording, where Beethoven
Beethoven
played one of
plays
his
himself,
sonatas.
yes. Wouldn't that be a fine?
However, we're going to settle for Chaliapin this time, right?
Oh, the great Chaliapin is going to sing, and he sings La Calunnia, the calumnious aria from Rossini, where he describes if you malign a person, first it will be very soft and gentle, but then the rumors will grow in strength and finally overwhelm him like a thunderstorm crashing down upon him. And Chaliapin, with his tremendous voice, is doing a wonderful job. The only thing that I would add to it, he took also great liberties with the compositions.
Oh, really?
Yes. For instance, when you will hear him sing this leggermente, dolcemente, he makes dolcemente, you know, things of that sort, which are forbidden today, are not being allowed anymore. So Chaliapin sings for us the Calunnia aria from Rossini's Barber of Seville.
Dunque, la calunnia che cos'è? Voi non sapete? No, no, davvero no. Allora uditemi e tacete. Che insensibile sottile leggermente e incomincia piano piano terra terra sottovoce sibillando va scorrendo va ronzando nell'orecchie della gente si introduce destramente e da teste di cervelli fa stordire, fa gonfiare. Dalla bocca fuori uscendo lo schiamazzo va crescendo, prende forza poco a poco, vola già di loco in loco, sembra un suono del verso che l'accende la foresta, va fischiando, brontolando e si fa bronciolare, alla fin la bocca ciò si propaga, si rebotta e produce un'esplosione. Come un colpo di cannone, come un colpo di cannone, un tremoto temporale che fa larga rimbomba, un tremoto temporale che fa larga rimbombar. pestato sotto il pubblico piacero per gran sorte maggior e il meschino calunniato avvilito calpestato sotto il pubblico flagelo per gran sorte va crepa sotto il pubblico flagelo perché sorte va crepar sotto il pubblico flagelo perché sorte va crepar si va crepar si va crepar si va
The great Chaliapin singing Rossini. Of course, I don't know. It's an endless association, I suppose, but I generally think of Chaliapin in synonymous terms with Boris Godunov.
Boris Godunov. Well, he publicized Boris Godunov quite a bit. It was completely unknown in this country, but he, in his guest appearance here, he always brought the whole company over, or he sang the solo of the famous Tsar Boris, and he must have been just terrific.
Had to be. I never saw him.
Great acting singer. Acting singer.
Yes. Well, you can tell that just, it comes through even on the recording of
Yes.
this Rossini. From the
I
Belfast.
allow him all the liberties that he wants. If the end results warrant his doing
He
it.
certainly justified it.
Yes, absolutely.
Chaliapin.
Chaliapin.
Now something of an entirely different nature we have coming up.
Yes, as we are wont to do, we're going from Rossini to Lauder, Sir Harry Lauder, the knighted comedian, English comedian, who made quite a number of recordings, but they are hard to get by. Here he sings a delightful song that he wrote himself. When I was 21, I never had any money, but I always had lots of fun. Harry Lauder singing When I Was 21.
So young as I used to be when I was in my prime. Although I'm turning old and grey, I've had a lovely time. To kiss a bonny lassie, I was never shy. The lad that doesn't love a lassie is no the real Mackay, because when I was 21, I never had lots of money, but I'd always lots of fun. Oh, I was a harum-scarum, and my courting days begun on the very, very, very next when I was 21. Oh, when I was 21. I never had lots of money, but I'd always lots of fun. Oh, I was a harum-scarum, and my courting days begun on the very, very, very next when I was 21. Oh, I used to court a bonny wee lass, her name was Macklewee. I got very fond of Mac and she got fond of me. I think she was the sweetest thing because she used to say, "You're very umpy-doodly with your fascinating way." I've got a bad cold. And you're sitting there laughing at me coughing. I tell you, you'll never cough yourself yet. Nah, the winter's not over. I tell you. I had to go to the doctor's today about my cough. He said, "What's the matter with you?" I said, "I've got a bad cold, doctor." He said, "Did you ever hear tell of anybody ever having a good one?" I said, "Well, mine is bad enough." He said, "Have you got a cough?" I said, "Yes, do you want to hear it?" So I coughed. "Oh," he said, "that's a wheedler." Aye, he said, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 74. Aye, well, he said, "Away home and be glad you're able to cough at that age." Oh, I tell you, there's a laugh in the doctor sometimes. But when I was a young fella, I tell you, I was a berkey. Oh, you should have seen me on the Sunday, with my hair split down the middle. Aye, and well soaped to keep it in its place. I tell you, boys, oh, when I was 21, I never had lots of money, but I'd always lots of fun. Oh, I was a harum-scarum, and my courting days begun on the very, very, very next when I was 21. Oh, when I was 21, I never had lots of money, but I'd always lots of fun. Oh, I was a harum-scarum, and my courting days begun on the very, very, very next when I was 21.
Oh, my. It's kind of catching, isn't it?
Contagious. Huh?
Well, it's a long winter, as
Yeah.
someone once
Now,
said.
isn't it surprising? I mean, it's not surprising that a man like this was knighted by the king and was made Sir Harry Lauder.
Came from very humble beginnings, too, I believe, in Scotland. I'm not sure where in Scotland, but what an entertainer.
Yes, yes.
But as you mentioned, that type of humor that he expressed is no longer with us, unfortunately.
Yes.
Really, you know.
Yeah.
It's marvelous to hear him do it, but if somebody else tried to get up and do it nowadays, you know, a modern-day singer-comedian, it would never go.
Well, vaudeville is gone anyhow. Then I would say he was a vaudeville artist.
Yes. London music halls and
Yes,
so forth.
yes,
And so on.
that's
Sir
correct.
Harry Lauder.
Yes. And now back to the opera.
Back to
to the ranch. Jan Kiepura, young, or rather at that time when he made this record, a young Polish artist who, as far as I remember, was one of the first one who sprouted a hairpiece because he was bald when he was very young. And otherwise a very good-looking man, so good-looking that he became a movie actor. And he sang in many sound movies, musical movies in Germany with great success. He was a fine actor too. Also was a member of the Metropolitan Opera for a few years. Here he sings the Air de la Fleur from the opera Carmen by Bizet. The conductor is, at that time he still called himself Hans Wilhelm, instead of William, Hans Wilhelm Steinberg. We shall hear Jan Kiepura singing from the opera Carmen by Bizet, the Air de la Fleur, the flower aria.
Je
short but very beautiful and effective aria, of course, from one of our great favorite operas, Carmen, the
Very,
Flowers.
very moving, and especially sung by a great singer like Kiepura.
Frankly, I've always felt rather sorry for Don Jose. You know, I mean, I'm just saying this, but really, it's a very, it's a sympathetic role
Yes.
in Carmen, but yet the poor guy, everything happens to him. He gets arrested by the gendarmerie after he lets Carmen go because he's in love with her, and he gets extremely jealous because she becomes infatuated with Escamillo, the bullfighter. At the end, of course, he stabs her.
Yeah, but first he's told his mama is dying, so he rushes home, leaves everything go. He rushes home to see his mama dying. And then he comes back in the fourth act of the opera, and he's still after Carmen, although he knows very well that she doesn't care for him anymore.
There was a performance in Chicago of Carmen several years back, and I wish I could remember the tenor's name. David something or other.
Poleri.
David Poleri. He and the gal who sang Carmen didn't get along too well. Are you familiar with this story?
Yes, I heard about it. Yeah,
And
tell it.
we got to the fourth act of Carmen, the big confrontation scene, and Poleri being a rather independent, so I met him down in New Orleans years ago. He was a pretty independent cuss. So what happened? He's supposed to stab Carmen. He didn't stab her. He left the stage without stabbing her.
Is that right?
Sang his aria, walked off the stage, did not go through the simulated action of stabbing her, and so Carmen more or less had to stab herself and fall over
Is
dead.
that
That's
right?
exactly right. David Poleri did that, and it caused quite a
That's why he was in a
stench.
doghouse.
Well, he was in the
doghouse.
doghouse
Yeah.
there for a while.
But you know, he died in an automobile
That
accident with
is
his
right,
wife.
is it
Yeah.
not? I'd forgotten about
A
it.
beautiful voice. He's also immortalized in his voice is immortalized in a performance of the Ninth Symphony, where he takes a tenor part. I think it's under either Leinster or Kusowicki. I forgot.
It could be one of those two,
Yeah.
yes. Now we turn to something in the instrumental vein, right, Manfred?
We are going back in time to the good times of the radio, when we listened so often to the first piano quartet. I don't know whether there was ever a second or third piano quartet, but they called themselves the first piano quartet. 4 gentlemen, terrific pianists, who arranged everything under the sun for their purposes, playing on 4 grand pianos. And for us, they are playing now the theme song, their theme signature, taken from Paganini's variations, violin variations.
This is from the 24th Caprice, actually.
Caprice, yes, by Paganini. So we shall listen to the first piano quartet of playing Paganini's variations on a theme by Paganini from the Caprice.
a highly stylized version of the famous Paganini theme from the 24th Caprice. Originally written, of course, for solo violin, and since that time, the theme itself has been arranged and rearranged and variations written on it by many, many different people.
Yes.
I think probably the most familiar of the variations were the Rachmaninoff variations for piano and orchestra.
And I think the most beautiful, too.
Yes, I believe so.
Just gorgeous. Yeah.
But I know that the Paganini 24th Caprice was, done for all manner of instruments and for various combinations or solo instruments, even for viola. Poor humble viola. It's been arranged for that, Manfred.
Talking about viola, the conductor of our next offering, Hermann Scherchen, was a viola player, a colleague of ours.
Right.
Before World War I, he was permanent conductor in Riga, and as an outspoken anti-fascist, Scherchen, who was not Jewish, should be pointed out, left Germany in 1932, a year before the taking over by Hitler, and settled in Switzerland. And then he made numerous records. Very fine conductor, Hermann Scherchen. Unassuming, not a great showman.
Must have been because of his viola.
Yes,
training,
down to
I'm sure.
brass, only conducting the most necessary movements with his hands. Now, Hermann Scherchen is conducting now Johann Sebastian Bach's miraculous composition, The Musical Offering. Now, the background for the musical offering, you don't hear that composition too often. It's like many other great works of art, a result of a social event. In May 1747, 3 years before he died, Bach visited Frederick the Great of Prussia. On this occasion, the king himself, no mean musician, he was a flutist, wrote out a theme, and a very difficult theme to boot, and asked Bach to improvise on it on a 6-part ricacciare. A ricacciare being the predecessor of the fugue. Bach returned home, and at home made this great composition on the theme by Frederick the Great.
He did modify it to some extent, did he not, according to what we have discussed?
Yes, but the original, we hear the original theme that Frederick the Great gave him in our presentation today.
You know, one of the things, may I interrupt just a second? We'll have to play this pretty shortly, but one of the great things I think about not only Bach's creative genius is the fact that he would use something. And then he apparently had a tremendous filing system of his own, because then he would go back, say some years later, pull it out and do it the same theme or the same composition for an entirely different setting, and I think this is wonderful.
Yes.
He had no compunction about doing this whatsoever.
The compositions of other compositions
He did
too.
this with Vivaldi and Corelli and some of the
composers.
other composers in his time, too.
Now, the musical offering that we shall hear now consists mainly of canons in which the original melody is played half as fast, sometimes twice as fast. Still others are played backwards. A very complicated way of writing, and only a great man like Bach could do it.
And it's for a chamber group, actually.
Yes, for soloists. 2, 4, 6, 8, now about 10 soloists.
Strings and winds and cembalo.
We are playing only the final unit of the musical offering, number 13, the Ricacciare, which is in final answer to Frederick's challenge. By the way, Bach inscribed the finished work with Regis Iuso Cantio et Relique Canonica Arte Resolata, which means which are the initials form the word Ricacciare. At the king's command, the song and the remainder is solved with canonic art.
All right.
Musical offering by Bach.
a portion of the Johann Sebastian Bach musical offering conducted by Hermann Scherchen.
Yes.
And it is not the easiest Bach in the world to listen to.
No, this is very hard on the...
It's erudite, it's intellectual
Yes.
music, and yet
Yes.
it is pleasing
Yes.
if you listen closely.
But we play music for all tastes and
That's
all
correct.
ages. And I was thinking while we were listening to it, how wonderful an age it was when the head of a state, like the King of Prussia, could give the greatest composer of this time a theme to tackle, to write variation. I wonder whether in our time any head of state would be able to write only a little theme like this.
Maybe Queen Elizabeth could give something to the Beatles to work on. Well, at any rate, with that note of levity, we're going to conclude our program today. Manfred Kuttner, a real pleasure doing another program with you on our series, Immortal Sounds from the Past.
I'm always happy to work with you, Jim.
And this is Jim Price speaking for KIOS-FM. Reminding you again, our audio engineer has been Mr. James Manier. We'll conclude today's program by saying meet us again next week at the same time.